border. We have an immigration attorney joining us now from the state of Texas, Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch. Kate, it's good to have you on the program. You know, let me start there with this visit of two cabinet secretaries to Mexico City tomorrow, because it speaks to this wider issue about what the federal government can do, if anything, to help this situation. What would you say would be the most helpful thing that can be done out of Washington to make things better along our southern border?
Sure, and I come at this having done asylum work in Texas as an immigration lawyer for 15 years, and there were many years, over 2 decades, where we had an orderly system for processing asylum seekers along the southern border. And that was through the utilization of the credible fear interview process, where a migrant could present at the border and say, I'm afraid of returning to my country, and they would be screened. And of course, not all of them qualified, and if they didn't qualify, they would be sent back to their countries. But what happened during the previous administration was we completely shut down the border under Title 42 and other policies. And that created this whole population of desperate, homeless refugees in Mexico who are not Mexican, and many of them are subject to violence living in Mexico. It's a very, very difficult situation for them, and it has exacerbated the problem. And so, in fact, contrary to what the previous recording said, we don't have an open border policy. We have a policy in place in which it is near impossible for someone to seek asylum in the United States. And so my argument is that we should go back to what we had, which was an orderly, dignified way to process asylum seekers and to bring some calm to this storm, rather than just completely shut things off and then pretend like this problem doesn't exist on the other side of our border. And these are human beings that need help.
Now, that's on one side of the border. On this side, too, we have a backlog, don't we, in the courts that, you know, has to be dealt with, I would suppose, in some way. Just put these figures up on the screen on the immigration backlog. Immigration court backlog is exploding, a record 3 million. And they have judges that are averaging 4,500 cases. I mean, that doesn't sound sustainable at all. I mean, what do we do about that part of it?
Sure. I mean, one of the major points is to use some common sense and something called prosecutorial discretion. Previous presidential administrations have said, you know, not everyone is a priority for deportation for us. We're going to focus on the people who have criminal histories or recent arrivals. And then again, in the past administration, President Trump said everyone is a priority, everyone goes into the system, no one gets out of the system. And so now we're slowly chipping away at it under the Biden administration. But one starting point is to look at the 3 million people in proceeding and say, do all of these people actually need to be in deportation proceedings? I have clients who have been in the immigration court system for over a decade, who are hardworking people who have 2 decades living in the United States. They have U.S. citizen children born here. They have no criminal history, and yet they find themselves stuck in the immigration court system. So I think we're not using common sense when we approach these policies. Instead, everybody just gets very heated and uses fear-based rhetoric, which drives voters, it drives attention, and at the end of the day, harms us all. What we really need to do is expand immigration in a way that supports the U.S. economy, because we have a need for immigrants here, separate from the asylum issue. We have a desperate need for immigrant labor, and we can't get Congress to agree on that. Meanwhile, we're all suffering.
I think one of the reasons it's gone so far in that direction, I mean, there are a number of reasons, many of them are political, which is understood, and we've talked about that. But I think the sheer numbers have changed a lot of people's perception of this issue. I mean, you have 10,000, 12,000 people per day coming across the border. There are people who had a more moderate view of this, or, you know, had a more sympathetic view for the people that were coming across now, that have changed their mind on this. And it seems like the political pendulum has swung so far in another direction. I'm not sure if it's possible to get it back, correct me if I'm wrong, until those numbers are reduced. Is that fair?
Well, you know, and I don't have the answers here, but here's a few things that I'll say. Number one, when we don't have an orderly system for processing people and they just get apprehended and sent back, that artificially inflates the numbers of apprehensions. So one person could be counted 5 times. So I question the numbers that are reported at the border. Another thing I'll say is that, you know, I went to the border last week. I wanted to see what this was about. What are they talking about? And when I went to Eagle Pass, I arrived in this field, and there were there were hundreds of migrants corralled in this field, but there was this space set up
Right.
for the media to park and view. And Border Patrol carried out a podium for a congressperson to come and give a press conference with this group of people behind them, spouting anti-immigrant sentiment. Meanwhile, people are being carried out on stretchers because they don't even have water, and yet they're being accused of bringing fentanyl into the country. It's just, to me, something is not adding up with this showmanship, I should say, of what's going on the border and the reality of what I'm seeing as an immigration lawyer
Right.
who's working with these
Yeah,
clients.
I've represented a lot of these people for years. We understand your point of view. You don't think that point of view is as represented maybe as it once was, that it's become too one-sided. It's interesting. We'll keep covering it, hopefully from all sides, including this one. Kate, thank you. Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch with us on the border issues, which are quite